In this video, how to make Neapolitan pizza dough, and this is for our wood fire pizzas that we will be stretching and making in an upcoming video. But first we need to make our dough. And so Neapolitan pizza dough is a low hydration dough, 59% water. So we're going to start with our water and add in our double-aught pizza flour. And it is very important that you use double-aught pizza flour for both texture. Also, it will not cook properly. If you use bread flour, it's going to burn. So here we're just mixing the flour and water together. Now, we add the yeast later on. However, in further testing, at this point, I prefer to actually just dissolve my yeast into my water before I add the flour. It just makes things a lot easier. So now that we've mixed the water and the flour together, we're going to just cover this with a piece of plastic wrap and allow it to rest for 30 minutes. And that's going to make the dough just easier to knead, easier to work, better gluten formation. It's called an auto-lease step. So here I have my yeast that I'm just dissolving in a little bit of water. Again, we could have easily just dissolved this in the main water at the beginning of the mixing and it would have been fine. So we're going to add in our salt at the end of the auto-lease period and then add in our yeast. And we're going to knead this for about 8 to 10 minutes total. And when you're using a KitchenAid mixer like this one, they are air-cooled. So you want to knead on the number 2 setting, and you want to knead for 4 minutes, turn it off, let it rest for a couple minutes just to cool down so you don't strain the motor, and then knead for another 4 to 5 minutes for a total of about 8 to 9 minutes of kneading. And what you're looking for is for it to pass the window pane test, where you can just take a little piece of dough and stretch a thin membrane. So after the kneading process, it's going to take the dough, ball it up into one single mass, and you can see how I'm kind of just pulling it tight on itself, kind of tucking the dough down underneath and forming into a tight ball. And that's just going to give it some resistance to allow it to rise during the proofing process. And here you can see I'm stretching it thin, right? So that's just making sure I have gluten structure. And you can see there I have plenty of gluten structure. So I'm just rounding the dough. I'm going to place in a container that I spray with a little bit of nonstick spray and allow the dough to bulk ferment overnight. And this is where it gets tricky with the Neapolitan pizza dough. You want to use just a little bit of yeast, and you want to do a long, slow rise. So if your dough is rising too fast because your kitchen is too hot, then you may need to place it in the refrigerator overnight. So maybe you do, say, 6 hours at room temperature and then place in the fridge for another 12 hours. But you need to do a long bulk fermentation of about 12 to 24 hours, or 16 to 24 hours, because that's what's going to make a low hydration dough, like this Neapolitan pizza dough, easy to stretch later on. So very, very important to do the long fermentation. Also, that long fermentation is really important to the overall flavor and texture of the dough. Now here, after the bulk fermentation, I've divided the dough into 2 pieces that weigh about 280 to 290 grams a piece. And then I'm just going to ball these up, give them a rounding, and place them on a tray to proof. Now, at this point, the yeast within this dough is fairly active, so I can allow this to proof at room temperature for about another 2 hours, and I'm going to be ready to make my pizzas. However, I like to do an extended proofing as well at this point. So normally what I'll do is I'll allow the dough to ferment overnight. The following morning, I'll shape the dough just like this. Then I'll allow it to proof at room temperature for maybe 30 minutes to 45 minutes, then place in the fridge for about another 5 to 6 hours, and then pull them out an hour before making my pizzas that night. So the point I'm trying to stress is with Neapolitan style pizza dough, it's very important that you do a long, drawn-out fermentation. However, during the proofing, which is your second fermentation phase, which we're doing right now, so the dough is portion balled up, now we're allowing it to proof. You want it to double in size, and you can see I've sprayed it with a little bit of a nonstick spray covered with plastic wrap. But you don't want to let it overproof, because if it overproofs, then you're not going to get a nice crust when we form it later. Now, for those of you who are doing this pizza for a restaurant, or you just want to do a big party, you want to have a bunch of people over to your house and do some wood fire pizzas, this is how you're going to do it. You want to get yourself a proofing bin, and you can see that I'm wetting the surface of my table, which is going to give me some friction, allowing the dough to stick to the table as I'm rounding it. So normally you wouldn't need to wet the table, right? But the Neapolitan pizza dough is such low hydration that it will slide around the table. So a little bit of wetting for the rounding, and you place it in these proofing bins. You can go 3x4, so you can fit 12 per bin, and then you want to cater wrap them with a little bit of plastic wrap to ensure that the dough doesn't dry out, because the dough, again, is already such low hydration. If it dries out even a little bit, it's going to give you a tough time. So you want to make sure you're tightly wrapping your pizza dough in plastic wrap so no air gets through. Then you're going to place a lid on top. These are stackable containers, so you can stack as many as you need to, and then retard in your refrigerator. Now, again, pull out of the fridge about an hour before you're actually going to make your Neapolitan pizzas. And this is what it should look like. You see how it's nice and springy? This is also, by the way, why we spray the top of this dough with nonstick spray. Because at this point, if you pull off the plastic wrap and it sticks, it's going to collapse that dough. So you can see how there's nice gas in here. The dough is opening nicely. I'm going to show you all these techniques in our next video, where we actually take you through the process of opening, topping, and baking the Neapolitan pizza in a wood fire oven. For more information on this video, stellaculinary.com/pizza will have your recipe and show notes.